Morning in the center of Warsaw. Crowds of young adults walk through the city. Designer clothes, elegant shoes, a Starbucks coffee in one hand and in the other, a 6,000 zloty iPhone. They enter glass buildings. The scent of expensive perfumes lingers in the elevator. These people manage projects worth millions of euros. They are professionals. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. We did it. The target has been achieved. Our hero, just before leaving, hears, "You've got what it takes to be a venture development manager." With a subtle, proud smile, he walks out of the office building. He steps into a crowded subway train. He puts his AirPods in to shut out the noise. Even though there are hundreds of faces all around, no one is looking at anyone else. Everyone escapes into their phone screen or searches for a small space where they can fix their gaze, falling deep into their own thoughts. Finally, he arrives at his destination. He turns the key in the door. Our young, highly educated specialist speaks fluently in 3 languages, but after work he returns to his rented 12 square meter studio apartment. The pull-out sofa occupies the entire living space. The toilet is squeezed in somewhere next to the sink, and a tiny hotel fridge stands in the entrance hall. This is by no means the most affordable option. It devours nearly 40% of his monthly earnings. And yet, despite all this young man is truly fortunate. His peers are renting rooms with strangers, or they're still dependent on their parents. How did this happen? People building professional careers live in less space than a car in a garage. Goshiwon is a tiny room in South Korea, originally created for students. Most measure between 5 and 10 square meters. Some are even smaller. Inside, a sofa, a small desk, a cabinet. The kitchen and bathroom are shared down the hallway. The idea was simple: isolate students for a while so they could focus on studying. Today, these rooms are permanent homes. Not just for students, but for workers and retirees. The rent is around $300 a month. In Seoul alone, more than 130,000 people live like this. And this isn't just about discomfort. These units are often in old buildings, don't meet safety standards, and living in such conditions can lead to depression and deepen isolation. Goshiwons symbolize social class inequality. Many residents are the working poor, and even people who made an effort, gained higher education, also end up in these micro rooms. Some of them talk about shame, paper-thin walls, no privacy, and one question that keeps coming back: am I a full citizen, or am I just being allowed to survive? Unlike in Korea and Poland, similar-sized units were marketed as a prestigious investment or a smart solution for singles. Warsaw. Renting a 10 square meter unit costs between 1,600 and 1,800 zlotys per month, while purchasing it is 21,000 zlotys per square meter, which is about 5,000 zlotys more per square meter than for standard apartments. Is it a good deal? No, but for many people, it was the only one they had, the most they could afford each month, the limit of their credit. Year 2018, a new regulation comes into force. Every residential unit must, from that moment, be a minimum of 25 square meters. What's the result? Investors will keep harvesting micro-apartments for another 6 years. Instead of selling residential apartments, developers now sell the same units under a different label, commercial property. That way, they don't have to follow minimum size rules, sunlight standards, or acoustic regulations. The view of your neighbor's wall? Even better. And you won't have to raise your voice to talk through it. By mid-2024, these regulations were better enforced. Units are still on the secondary and rental markets, but new developments of this kind are practically no longer being built. We might think that this is a success. The pathological product was removed, but the pathological causes remained. People still need a roof over their heads. The blocking of new micro-apartment construction has made the already existing units a highly sought-after and scarce commodity. Everything built before 2023 turned out to be an even better investment than expected. The law protects our dignity, so we don't buy a hole like that. Instead, we'll buy another one, more expensive, or nothing at all. The law banned the construction of homes people could actually afford. Even if they were flawed, what if someone can't afford 25 square meters? Poland is near the top in the European Union. Most people between 25 and 34 still live with their parents. This is not Italy. These people did not make that kind of cultural choice. They simply had no other option. They were left with no choice but to return to their old room, the one they still remember from their school days. If you have a good relationship with your parents, it might even be nice for a little while. You'll get a good dinner, your mom will do your laundry. But eventually, you'll feel your life has come to a complete standstill. Behind the wall, you have your parents who still treat you just like a child. You meet someone new and then what? Will you invite them to your place, to your small room in your family home? Goose and Eurostat confirm that year by year, the percentage of people returning to their parents is growing. In this regard, we are practically leaders in Europe. From what I've read, only Ireland has seen a bigger increase in recent years. Remember how not long ago adults living with their parents were looked at sideways? Today, it's becoming normal. Do we really want to call more than half of working young adults failures? Or is something else wrong here? The whole situation feels like a grim joke. We're choosing between bad and worse. The law meant to protect quality of life has taken away many people's shot at independence. If living with your parents isn't an option, then you share a place with a stranger. Just find somewhere to stay. The cost of renting a room in a large city can easily exceed 1800 zlotys. In a micro apartment, you had 10 square meters, but they were all yours. Now you have a 10 square meter room and you're arguing with strangers about cleaning the kitchen and access to the bathroom. The UK has gone through a similar scenario. They're building homes and flats there where strangers are packed in. The aim? To squeeze as many tenants as possible into a small area. Local authorities are openly stating that this is the fastest route to the creation of slums. The term slum rentals even appears. But should that really surprise us? Can you even imagine that? A high turnover of complete strangers. You have absolutely no idea who you're sharing a roof with, and sometimes you end up with a truly difficult flatmate. You're constantly arguing with these people about every little thing, about cleaning, water consumption, or electricity usage. Let's also mention that the rooms are of poor quality, and the landlords often don't respond to maintenance issues. What's the point? Someone will mess it up again anyway. I'm not defending the greed of banks or developers. We'll get to that in a moment. What I'd rather we see from this example is that where simple solutions and narratives are sold, it's easy to manipulate our opinion. In Hong Kong, they openly admit they're afraid to ban the creation of such cages, because they know those people would then end up on the streets. Here, the bar has simply been raised. Some people will say, it was tough in my day too. I worked hard, and I have it. It's hard to talk rationally when we're throwing emotional jabs. So let's look at the hard data. The 90s. A wave of sales of municipal and company housing. Discounts then were as high as 90 or 95%. Municipal housing stock dropped from over 1,700,000 units to 780,000. This was a transfer of wealth into the pockets of one generation. Today's 25 or 30-year-old doesn't have that possibility. Let's move on. Let's compare purchasing power, current salaries versus those from 20 years ago. The year 2004, before the economic boom. Then, to buy a 60 square meter apartment in Warsaw, you had to save an average salary for 7 years. According to Deloitte's data, today for the same apartment, it takes even 12 years. Doesn't that sound tragic? Let's add to that today's rental costs consume 44% of the average salary. That's one of the worst results in all of Europe. Vienna is 25%, Berlin is around 30%. Renting in Germany works very differently than in Poland. Germany is a country of tenants. It's normal to rent your whole life, and no one feels worse for not owning a place. A landlord can't just raise the rent whenever they want. It has to stay within local price limits. That's why there aren't such wild price fluctuations there, like in Poland. They also have massive companies that own hundreds of thousands of apartments for rent. People don't like them because, big capital, but it still provides comfort, professional management, an app for reporting breakdowns, and a contract signed for 10 or 20 years, which doesn't surprise anyone there. Of course, there are also downsides. More often you will get an apartment with bare walls, which you'll have to completely furnish yourself, and you might go through a bureaucratic nightmare before you can even rent it. But for someone who truly values stability and doesn't want to move every other year, that market is simply better. In Poland, rent is expensive compared to our salaries. Therefore, often the only way to feel secure is a loan and buying your own property. But if you're paying half your salary for rent, since you need a place to live, it's hard to save for even the first down payment. And then there's creditworthiness, which in our country is a separate universe. The bank claims you can't even afford a mortgage payment that's the same as the rent you're currently paying. In the 90s, rents for public or cooperative apartments were practically symbolic when compared to people's earnings. If someone already had a place from the previous system, they could build capital fairly easily just by working. Look how often politicians or so-called experts on morning TV criticize young people, entitled, "They want everything right way." Back then, 5 people lived in a small 2-bedroom flat, and that was supposed to be fine. And really, all they need to do is stop buying coffee out. These experts usually live in their own homes, which they bought 20 years ago for a fraction of today's value, or they simply inherited them. They have no idea what it feels like for young people in 2026 who are earning a decent income of over 5,000 zlotys net. And yet, they know they will never even own their own studio apartment. It's a shame. A shame that they have to move back in with their parents. A shame that they can't afford to invite a partner to a proper apartment. And it's a shame that they work, but they're still poor. Then they hear in the media that they're to blame. Do you know what that can do to a person? It can push someone into depression, feeling completely hopeless. Or it builds resentment, a need to prove they are not inferior. And that's where compensation through consumption kicks in. Research shows that people with damaged self-worth are more likely to buy luxury goods to show off. That's how our psychology works. A classic example, impoverished districts right outside their homes, expensive cars on lease, young people barely affording a studio apartment with their last dime, simultaneously buying the latest phone model on installments. We all observe this, but rather than ridicule, let's endeavor to comprehend. They are attempting to normalize their social standing. They don't possess assets, unlike prior generations. So, through current consumption, they strive to feel better about themselves. Outwardly, you might appear to be middle class, but economically, you're actually standing on the brink of an abyss. People under financial pressure don't always cut their expenses as logic would dictate. Sometimes they do the exact opposite. They do it to boost their self-worth. This is called luxury poverty, a situation where people can't afford basic security, but instead buy gadgets and live a life for show. You have brand-name shoes, but you count every penny at the grocery store. You didn't go to the dentist, but you got a TV on installments. And this isn't human stupidity, it's a side effect of this system. Let's assume someone gives up that coffee out in the city, because this is a very real argument that's brought up not only in Poland. Let's say 25 zlotys saved per day. In round figures, that person will save 9,000 zlotys annually. That's quite a lot of money. Meanwhile, the price of the dream studio apartment increased by 50,000 zlotys. Annual increases of 10% are a cautious estimate. In previous years, it even went up to 25%. Even the down payment increased by more than they managed to save. In reality, expenses are already limited by the need to pay high bills. Saving money on coffee might sound like a good idea, but let's ask ourselves honestly, how many thousands of dollars per month we can realistically put aside if we start saving even more diligently beginning today? What an absurd question. Even if we change those thousands to hundreds of zlotys, what's left of life if you cut out even the smallest pleasures? And will putting aside 2,000 or 3,000 zlotys annually truly improve your housing situation? I'm bringing this up to illustrate the sheer scale of the issue. If buying a home doesn't directly concern someone, it's quite easy for them to nod along and say, but there are programs, for instance, like the Safe Credit 2%. Politicians use our money to help those who don't yet own a home buy one more easily. Do you think that's true? So let's see how it works. July 2023. Instead of letting property prices naturally fall, the government pours gasoline and throws a match with its Safe Loan 2% program. Housing prices immediately jump by 7% above the market trend. 15 billion zlotys from the budget effectively flowed to developers and banks. What a gift from all of us. Developers stopped competing on price. Why cut margins if the government is paying? Some will say, fine, but many developers have gone bankrupt. That's true, the smaller firms are struggling. Those who took on debt and built at maximum risk truly had a problem when interest rates rose. But the big players, Dom Development boasted that 2024 closed with its highest profit ever, 569 million zlotys net, a 24% increase compared to the previous year. At the same time, while the young generation says we've been blocked, developer margins in Poland are about 30%, the highest in Europe. Those who manage to get a loan are happy that they have lower installments, but they took out a loan for 30 years. In 10 years, the state subsidy will end, their monthly payment will rise, and they also bought the apartment for more. Those who missed out are even worse off. The market has gotten out of hand again. And who won in all of this? Besides developers, banks also got a gift. Tens of thousands of new borrowers during a period of high interest rates, where demand would normally be stagnant without subsidies from our money. Some of these people would have taken out this loan. Why don't politicians address such important topics? Why do we hear arguments in the media at a primary school level? Instead of dealing with serious problems and trying to find solutions, let's imagine two different companies. One has a marketing budget of 5,000 Polish zlotys, the other has 500 million. Which one do you think will probably win? Is what happens in politics always a deliberate arrangement? Corporations fund election campaigns. Certain groups hold a clear advantage. Those who win often have debts to repay, so they protect a system that boosts profits for the biggest players at everyone else's expense. And what happens if they refuse to play along? It's simple, they won't have the budget needed to win the elections. Elections aren't won in any other way than with money and connections. This is an illusion of our democracy that we simply don't want to see. No one from outside the establishment has a chance to get into a position where they can truly change anything. And what if, by some mistake, that were to happen? Image specialists will very quickly eliminate such a person from the perception of the majority of society, and that will be sufficient. In my opinion, the majority of politicians are merely figureheads, proxies, who enable the realization of interests at much higher levels, without truly possessing any real influence. They put on a show for us, they keep us distracted. The standard isn't high, but it's expensive. It's not that politics lacks intelligent people, it doesn't. They understand economics. They know these mechanisms far better than we think. If we all sat down together right now and said, hey, let's launch a 2% mortgage, we'd immediately start looking for the weak spots. Give us an hour and we'd come up with something better than what passed. So what's really going on? Maybe everything is working exactly as intended. Just my take. Let me know in the comments what you think. I don't believe anything can change through voting in a system set up like this. It's an illusion meant to keep us in the cage, arguing with each other instead of facing the real systemic problem. And what if we were to suddenly rebel? Who would the police and the military, financed by our own money, protect at that point? Certainly not us. Back to the point. With each year, something else becomes clear. The family you're born into matters more than how hard you work. Wealthy parents pass down more than money or property. They pass down connections and guidance, and that advantage is hard to overcome through effort alone, if it's possible at all. I know that some people also don't update their views. They cling tightly to what was true 10 or 20 years ago, but the world is changing. For the first 20 years after communism, Poles believed in natural social advancement. You study, you work, you're building a better life for yourself. But the data shows that this fairy tale is already over. In Poland, 10% of the wealthiest households control 62% of the country's assets. 1% of the richest controls approximately 30%. And what about the other side? A large part of society has more debt than assets. Someone who inherits an apartment in a big city gets a gift others would work half a lifetime for, if they ever get it at all. On top of that, some professions work like closet clubs. Elites connect with elites. Say you want to start a business. You scroll through your contacts. The guys you grew up with went to top private schools. They come from wealthy families. They possess the necessary capital and resources for you to operate together on a significant scale. If you don't come from those circles, then access to those same people is practically impossible. Let's consider lawyers. You can certainly finish your studies and work in the profession, but working in a small firm in the suburbs is not the same as working in a prestigious firm in central Warsaw. A child from a poor family competes with someone whose family, for example, has been running a law firm for generations. Which of them do you think will get the better job? We are talking here about probability, not about exceptions. The education system theoretically should be social ladder, but often that is not the case. And it's not a question of intelligence, but simply a different starting point. The upper echelons don't frequent the same clubs as us. We won't run into them at the grocery store, nor will we encounter them on vacation. The upper class is invisible to ordinary people. In Poland, hardly anyone talks about this openly, because instead, it's often disguised as different lifestyles or other pretty words. This system is not created by employees or micro-entrepreneurs. We are playing someone else's game. The system gives just as much as it has to, but at the same time, not enough for us to ever threaten those who establish the rules here. In Poland, status inheritance is measured by the Phil index. It's comparable to the UK and US. So these are countries where your last name, childhood address, and parents' resources truly determined your future. In other words, we live the myth of the American dream. To have a chance to change your life, you need commitment, hard work, and luck. People born into wealthy, educated families sometimes simply don't realize how much the good fortune of their birth has influenced their current position. Self-confidence is not the same as an actual advantage, and I don't want to diminish anyone's hard work here. I just want to emphasize that two extremes are harmful. Both giving up the fight to improve what one has within their capabilities and the lack of humility in those who have been very lucky, yet remain convinced that their success is owed exclusively to their own exceptionalism. There's one more thing we haven't talked about yet, the biology of social class. Poverty in childhood is a biological debt, and it can't be repaid in adulthood. Let's consider two women as an example. Both of them are 40 years old, and both earn precisely the same amount. However, their lives are structured in a completely different way. Monica, she is from the working class. Her parents couldn't afford private medical care or an orthodontist. They also had no knowledge in this area because their parents also didn't care about preventative health. Today, Monica struggles with her teeth and joints. Treatment costs take a large share of her income and lower her quality of life. Natalia, wealthy family. Braces in childhood, regular checkups, a healthy diet. In adult life, there are no health-related problems whatsoever. In Poland, dental care has become a luxury service. A staggering 90% of Poles suffer from tooth decay. This is due to a deeply ingrained myth, for instance, that there is no need to treat baby teeth, high sugar consumption, a lack of proper hygiene during childhood, and as a result, such a child has cavities by the age of 2 or 3. Public dental care is difficult to access, and private care is expensive. Many people delay treatment for years. And those with visible gaps in their teeth often have fewer chances on the job market. Add to that the constant stress about money, which really does speed up aging. In practice, wealthier Poles live up to a decade longer than the poorest. I believe this scale is still underestimated, though, because official data focuses mainly on education, not on wealth. The higher the social class and income, the longer and healthier your life is. That's why this isn't about whether or not you'll go on vacation or where. Social class genuinely influences everything in our lives. Is this just one big conspiracy against us? I think we're looking at overlapping interests. No one is really looking out for us. They just need to do enough to keep us from taking to the streets and to keep us functioning as workers. As you can see, they're doing great because we're creating a world where most of us don't actually want to live. We don't have time to think about all of this, and we fall into various traps driven by ads, media, and simply our ordinary human weaknesses. Before you know it, you're burdened with loans, installments, and you're giving away everything you earn. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. Do you think there's any real way out of this situation? Or are we left with no choice but to come to terms with the system we're stuck in and try to arrange our own world as best as we can, as much as that's even possible? Thank you for staying with me through this difficult topic. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Do you remember Tattoo? Two girls kissing on stage, massive global fame, millions of records sold, that part we all know, but few people realized that behind the project was a doctor, a child psychiatrist. Lena and Julia, when they were only 14 years old, fell into his hands. Click the thumbnail to see how this sick Russian experiment looked from the inside. This is called Lemon. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in a moment.